You're listening to the Two Sleuth Podcast, all about the business of dentistry, hosted by yours truly, Greg Essenmacher, a fixable arch dental expert and founder of G&A Consult, speaking with industry leaders on the dental landscape from their perspective. Welcome back, another episode of the Two Sleuth Podcast. It is my distinct pleasure, and yes, I'm using that word intentionally because we've already thrown around a few words that made both of us laugh, is none other than Dr. Avi Patel. Avi, welcome to the Two Sleuth Podcast. Welcome to the hot seat, brother.
I am honored to be here, Craig.
Yeah, I knew you were going to throw that phrase out there. It's so cheesy and it's so not you. If you don't know Avi, if you are not following him on Instagram, and he's evolved. So watch the evolution of Avi on Instagram over the last, couple of years, where first it was just, first it was you and your wife because nobody wanted to see you solo. And now it's just like this big floating illuminated head, like it's coming down, I don't know, what is it, Fifth Avenue in the Macy's parade every Thanksgiving. It's great content, though. It's great content because it talks really about so many things for clinicians that are so relevant today with DSOs, with individual clinicians, and all the good stuff. So what are you seeing, Avi, out there? What are the top things that are resonating with people that you're working with today?
So before I get into that, I do have to correct you because I was doing this and it's something that I do. So right way to pronounce my name is actually Avi.
Avi?
Yes, Avi, like aligners, kind of like a UH.
Gotcha.
And I'm sharing that because I corrected Sarah Ruberg at ADSO or at the ADGP, and ever since then she just called me Dr. Patel, and I was like, because she didn't want
Yeah,
to
I'm
mess
not going
up
to
my
call you
name.
Dr. Patel. Okay, so let's see if you can pronounce my last name for my listening audience. And if you get that correct, then I will correct your first name. Go ahead. Let's see it.
I'm gonna go with Essenmacher.
Oh, you got it right. Dang it.
There you go.
How
There you
dare
go.
you? All right, Avi.
Oh, perfect. Okay, now that we got that out of the way. By the way, I do that because I respect you, and I have a feeling we're gonna have a friendship for a while. So that's why I do it. If I didn't really think of it,
Presumptuous of you. I like that you actually believe that. It's good for you.
if I didn't think there would be anything here long term, I would have just let you incorrectly pronounce it. But it's out of respect. Now,
Most of my listening audience knows this already, that I'm passionate about saying people's names properly, and I butcher them often, so I do appreciate that. All right, go ahead, please.
I got you. I got you. Yeah. So what the question was? What was it? What am I seeing in the industry?
I've knocked him off his foundation in the first 3 minutes. Yes, score one for the home team. Yeah, just what are you seeing out there? What are the biggest challenges you're seeing out there with clients, DSOs, practices that you're working with today?
I I am seeing a gap in the execution. So everybody knows what most everybody has some idea of where they want to go, right? Some type of growth or some direction, but where the gap is that I'm seeing is in the execution. So from individual clinicians, some of them don't know how, like they want to grow their businesses, they want to grow their practices, but they don't know the business side, right? So there's a gap there, and they usually look for help sometimes, or they kind of huddle up and act as if it's not happening, put their head in the sand, right? And then with DSOs, it's, they want to go down this, same store growth thing that gets thrown around everywhere. But then the actual like actions and plans that they have to do it really just fall short. And in my opinion, they're pretty half baked. We can totally dive into this as well, but that is the biggest thing. It's, the buzzwords in the industry are, same store growth, all that kind of stuff. And for me, just seeing it with my perspective of, having been an associate dentist where I worked at, I'll call it 11 offices, right? Private, DSO, everything in between. I've kind of seen the common thread, which is like a lot of people just don't know what they're doing. And I say that out of respect and appreciation, but there's like this when you first come into the industry, whether it is for me, I'm just going to talk from my perspective as a
Please.
young dentist coming out. I thought that practice owners knew everything. I thought that DSOs had all the solutions. I thought that everybody had it all figured out, and I just needed to kind of slide right in, be another cog in the wheel or wheel in the cog, and be able to kind of do my part and like move things forward and kind of trust all of that. But because I've seen so many different ways and had different experiences, things like I worked at a practice. One practice, they onboarded me for 2.5 weeks. Another practice, they just put me in the chair and I was expected to see patients the next day. And I'm just like, how do I use the software? Who do I tell to do what? And so it's like, I saw that enough times to be like, "Oh, wow, okay." Like, there is a sense of beauty in this, in the sense of, like, there's opportunity to where, like, if you actually commit to systematizing things and you do that hard work up front, you can actually grow and scale, and I've seen it because I've been in well-oiled machines, but then if you don't know how to do that and you don't get that help, you're gonna go where a vast majority of people are at, and you're just gonna be spinning your wheels, not really going forward.
Well, and you started out there by saying something that I think was so keen, right? That associates, they come out of dental school, they get into an organization, and the assumption is that there is a plan, the plan is good, and now I'm a part of that plan. And as long as I learn in that system, in that plan, there are systems in place, right? I call them processes, right? Very similar. And that once I do that, then I'm going to be set because I didn't necessarily learn the business side of dentistry, in dental school, even though some of the schools say, oh, yeah, they come out and they're ready to know business. I'm sorry. I'm going to challenge that every day of the week and I'm going to slap it down because I see it all the time. And the other piece you talked about, which is you talk about it as execution. We talk about it as implementation, right? At GNA Consult. It's same concept. Right. So it's really taking the plan, if there is one, and being able to implement it, right, step by step. And these are so critically important because there are the buzzwords, and I think they're more categorizations that happen just to try to frame what is going on, right? Because we had in the DSO space, the ungodly multiples, right? That private equity money came in 2021, 2022. If it had four walls, we're going to buy it and we'll put our system on it and it's going to make us ridiculous amounts of money. That
Mhm.
didn't work out so good, right? Because we saw what happened there. Then it was, well, now let's create same store sales, right? Let's make each store more profitable and do better. And then it'll have some more value. So it's just, I think it's a way for people to understand mentally in very elementary terms of what we can do next. So I love that you've, in those two ways, been able to categorize what are the biggest problems here. So let's drill down a little bit because I can tell you that for those that have systems are mind numbing and they can be boring and they can be difficult because success for individual practice owners almost happen by mistake up to a certain level. But what gets them there can't get them there to the next level in scaling. And I think that's where there's that disconnect because they've gotten that far. We see it all the time in full arch, right? Well, I've been able to grow my practice to $2-3 million annually. And then suddenly now they add full arch and they can't understand why it's not working in there. Or they'll mistakenly get a handful of arches here or there, or they'll do 4 or 5 in one month and then none the next month. And that volatility, if you will, right? The VIX index or whatever they call it, and the stock market, they don't understand why it's so volatile because there's no system, there's no consistency. So tell me a little bit about when you're seeing that, how do you get from here, which is that volatility without processes, to convincing that it's a process issue, it's a systematic issue, and this is what you need to do to get there? Because nobody likes to take their medicine in that respect. Talk to me a little bit about
No,
that.
yeah, that's a great point. So for me in the aligner space with GPs, it starts at the beginning, which is I mean, GPs, we don't know how to do the procedure. Like, we were never taught. Like, we weren't taught how to do business, and we weren't taught how to actually do the procedure, and you can say this to any general dentist out there, and they will nod their head, and they will smile, and they'll be like, "Yeah, you're right, we don't." But that's not an excuse, in my opinion, to not be able to learn, right? You just don't know how to do aligners, dot, 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 yet. Once you are open to that, that's when then you can kind of get that initial foundational kind of education to get your feet under you. And then you want to kind of make things, in my opinion, as simple as possible, right? So having a certain kind of framework or just a couple types of cases that you treat so that you limit the downstream problems. And this is like how we're getting into the whole process and the system. It's like even down to its very core on how you learn and execute or implement this procedure. if you actually just narrow the amount of, or narrow the types of cases you even take on, that will lead to a downstream effect of, you know, theoretically less problems. But it actually does work and it happens. So having that at a provider level, you can then kind of zoom out at an organizational level. And so where a lot of things go wrong is previously, like, there weren't really that many solutions or ways to get your doctors trained, right? They would have to kind of take it upon themselves, take the $2,500 CE stipend, go find a course, take the course, come back, learn how to do it, and then, try to implement it themselves. And so that's great for probably 10% of the dentists in an organization because 90% of them don't want to do that. The whole reason why they're at your DSO is because what we just said earlier, they are coming to be a part of a system, right? And so when there is no system, majority of them are not actually cut in the type of way to push this forward. Because if they did that, they would be a practice owner.
To be
And so,
self-motivated, the entrepreneurial spirit, the "I'll do it myself." Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
And I'm speaking, and this is all, again, anything I share is from my personal experience. Like,
Of course.
some of it can be generalized, but everything I share is like what I saw. And so that was me. Like when I was at a DSO, like I actually made a move. We moved from the Northeast down to Texas because there was an opportunity, and it was a way for us to, or a way for me rather, to be in a practice in a group that was going to support me. Because I was at a point where I just wanted to have access to some type of education to do expanded procedures like implants and aligners. And then I wanted to kind of leverage that to be able to then go out and be like the best dentist I could be. But I wanted to go home at 5 p.m. and not worry about anything else, right? It's
Yeah.
it's your classic what you see on every DSO's website, like, oh, you just do the clinical, we'll do everything else. Like,
"Leave the
copy and
headache
paste,
behind, we'll do all
yeah,
the rest." Yeah, yeah.
copy and paste it a million times. It's the most embarrassing thing, but it's just where we're at because the threshold is so low, right? The threshold is so low. But when these groups can actually follow through on it, which the group that I was at to some degree did, right? Because they put me at least in front of the resources, and then I took action on them. And then where this ended up kind of falling out is the sense of like when I wanted, like, I kind of reached the capacity of growth that this DSO had created for their associates. And then so once I hit that point, that is why the associate leaves. Like, your associates are leaving your practices because the growth opportunity for them is capped. And sometimes, getting them access to webinars and this and that, it's like, in my opinion, like, from what I saw, like, that was like a half big solution because that's what they did. Is like, it was a webinar. What I did is I attached myself to a mentor, and then I kind of used some of the resources from the mentor, but then also had to go through the trial and error. Most dentists are not going to want to do that. They're just going to say, yeah, this seems like I have to do a lot of the heavy lifting. I'm not going to do that. So I'm just going to stay in my lane, bread and butter. And then they burn out, they get upset, and then they leave because they think they can do it better themselves and go be a practice owner. And then they become a practice owner and they realize there's so much business involved. And then this is what I call like the toxic cycle of dentistry. Um, and so, yeah, it's kind of how the industry is, fostering this kind of
Yeah.
culture and this pathway. And as a group, it's like if you actually kind of dedicate the time to like figuring out what this growth roadmap is, um, you can be successful. And you have to also remember, like, not every dentist is going to necessarily want to grow clinically. Some of them actually do want the business growth pathway. And so there's ways to kind of build that in, but you got to actually have intention behind it.
Hey there, it's Greg Essenmacher, host of the Two Sleuth podcast and founder of G&A Consult. At G&A, we specialize in transforming full arch dental practices, teaching, coaching, and training teams to deliver an exceptional patient experience, from that first call to delivering final smiles. Whether you're a practice owner, a DSO executive, or a regional leader looking to expand your full arch program, boost same-store sales, or unlock the true profitability of full arch cases, we've got you covered. Ready to see how full arch can elevate your practice? Visit the show page or book a discovery call today. Let's turn your potential into results. Well, and it takes investment, obviously, by the owners, the groups, and whatnot, to be able to identify what path makes the most sense. And I love that last point that you made. But to go back to what you talked about, right, which is that process or the system to put into place, first and foremost, is an acknowledgement or an awareness, right? That there is a gap in learning or clinical skill level, being open to that learning, providing that simple framework. And I don't think it matters what auxiliary skill we're talking about, whether it's implants, simple or full arch, sleep, clear aligners, your lane. It doesn't really matter what lane it is, that being able to have case selection in the beginning to be able to mitigate the challenges downstream further along, right? Case selection is so critically important, right? So in my lane, like in full arch, your first 5 cases, you're not going to do a zygo or pterygoid case. You're just not, right? I mean, that's crazy days. I mean, maybe I think maybe some do, but that's another story for another day. The you and the start where you start in the beginning, and that's where the mentorship and the selection and being able to know what is your limitation in the beginning, because you want to start to build this success ratio where you're going to have success in the beginning, where you start to build your confidence, right?
Mm.
So rather than throwing the wide scope as possible and saying I can do all things, it's like anything else, right? You start to build and grow from the success of the early on and understand where your lane and limitation is. I mean, this is the way that you build and grow confidence and build and grow that lane, the new vertical of revenue. And
Mhm.
we see that all the time. But having that system in place, it's where the advantage of the group practices are compared to your individual clinic, because you have those potentially within the group, within the clinic, within the region, whatever it is that potentially can be there. And then your comment about the half baked, here's where the piece I think that's so critically important, because the outgrowing of where the limitation happens, right? Because there is this sense of, is there a pathway for it? And I'm not going to name any groups, but there are a few groups out there that I'm well aware of that have grown significantly, that do have those pathways to say, we want to foster and generate and grow and give them a pathway and give our clinicians a pathway that start as associates. And we want to build and grow them to where they do become practice owners and stay within our group. Some do and some won't. But we know that it reminds me of the Richard Branson quote, right? That, treat your people and train them so that they can leave, but treat them like they don't want to, right? So they don't want to. And that's so critically important, and finding that and bringing those resources in rather than treating them like a number and what is their production, which is still critically important. Don't get me wrong. And so when you're having these initial conversations, and my world is pretty heavily in the GP world. We do work with some specialists, but it really is heavily dominated in the GP world, as well. In those initial conversations that you're having, what are some of the areas that you're finding that you're experiencing some of the not the pushback, not the ones that are asleep, right? When I say asleep, those that just aren't really on board with what you're talking about, which is really next level of dentistry, right? So what are you finding that are some of the challenges and hurdles that you need to overcome in order to have adoption of what you're teaching and educating? Because from what I understand, you have taught a lot, right? You've really been out there and sharing this for a while and honing in on your messaging and teaching hundreds of clinicians on this concept and working with a number of different groups on the implementation side. And you're agnostic, right? You're not tied to any particular manufacturer, which I think is amazing. And that's the same way we are at G&A Consult. So why don't you talk a little bit about that? I think that could be helpful for listeners.
Yeah, totally. So at a provider level, the biggest thing is just open-mindedness and willingness to actually take action on this, right? Like it's actually that simple of like, hey, are you actually wanting to do this? Everything from there, uh, it's more or less seamless, or rather, it's a lot easier because then that's when like the kind of coaching aspect comes in to be able to support them along the way. From a group standpoint, you know, um, the pushback there can be more of like, or the gap that I'm seeing is like the actual internal infrastructure for like a rollout or oversight, right? A lot of the groups is the way they're structured is has been more on like the practice acquisition side, so the business development side, but then the actual clinical, call it mentor, chief dental officer, whatever it is, it's not as robust. And so that doesn't mean that the person who is the chief dental officer isn't capable of this. It just means bandwidth, right? Like you've got, you know, however many locations. There's not like a defined ratio. Like, hey, for every X providers, we will have one mentor, one chief dental officer, and then, taking that and then splitting it into the subspecialties because there's a bunch of great GPs who can mentor on, you know, treatment planning and bread and butter and root canals, but that actual dentist has no idea how to do aligners. So it's like, should that person actually be the person like overseeing, all the cases? And it's like probably not, but that is something that I've seen is just the way that they're internally built. And so I try to help with that by helping them with like a rollout strategy. So like part of it is, I mean, a bunch of these groups are fragmented, right? It's acquisition, and then they try, like, it's rare that they will have like a clear channel where you can drop a message in there and it just gets sent out equally and evenly to everybody. You have to, right? So part of that is like, cool, how can we gather everybody in the sense of like making them even motivated or incentivized to like even listen? Like that's how I assume, because I've through all the content I've made on social media and just everything I've learned on just from like the marketing and like sales aspect, it's all the same principles. Like if you want attention or you want to convey a message, like you have to grab the attention, deliver some type of value, and then be able to follow up on the back end. And so for me, and I mean, I'll just share it. Like part of the rollout strategy that I kind of work with groups on is changing the compensation structure. So it's like, if you want to grab attention of your associates and the doctors in the practice, making an announcement like, hey, we're changing the way that we're going to pay you around this procedure. And we're going to do it in a way that's actually beneficial to you. And it's going to be more transparent. And you're actually going to be excited about it. Right. And so we're going to review this on a call because we are now, working with Clearliner Advisor, and we'll give you all the details. Like that in and of itself, people are going to sign it like, what? Pay? You're changing my pay? Like, what's going on here? And then you get them together, and then you can, it's the whole like, you wrap the medicine in like bacon or whatever, like the same.
Spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down. Mary Poppins taught us that one.
There you go, right? And so that is like an easy way to do it. Or not easy, it's one way to do it, and I found, and again, this is coming from my experience. When I was at the group, I was a newer doctor in the organization, and aligners were an initiative. They made an announcement. They coupled, like, these webinars with the new payment structure, and the older doctors in the group were like, "What? You're changing our comp?" But, like, everyone showed up, and I showed up and I was like, "Oh, this actually makes a lot of sense." And then at that point, it was very clear, like whoever was open-minded and open-minded to actually doing it, I was one of those doctors, took it and ran with it. So that is like how you can kind of help combat that in the sense of like, you know, getting some type of incentive and motivation to take action on this stuff.
Yeah, and you're just screaming all about mindset, right? And that's really what it's all about. The mindset of the individual clinicians or practitioners, and whether or not they have their ability to change and being open to, and what change management looks like within any structure or organization. And it can be different, but and it really screams to the point. And I love to talk about, where attention goes, focus grows, and
Mhm.
that is with any organization. There's a limited amount, and I'll use your word of bandwidth, right? And within any organization, and decisions have to be made. And if there is going to be an initiative, a push, whatever the case is, for a particular auxiliary service like clear aligners, and bringing in someone like yourself to be able to push that initiative forward, or bring in G&A Consult to focus on full arch, it's not just the micro team that's hyper focused on that particular service, right? Treatment for patients. It affects everyone.
Mhm.
It affects every single aspect of the business. And when you pull one lever, what are the other four or five that are affected by it? And being mindful and having a 360 view of all of it. So I really appreciate that you brought that forward, because it's important to have that have that ability to be able to see all the pieces. And that's where working with the large groups and the DSOs, of knowing who all of the people who are involved in, it's not just the chief clinical officers and those that are involved, but all of the parties involved in the implementation pieces, as I call it, and the execution pieces, as you've shared earlier. Well, my friend, this is the part of the program all of my guests over the 100 episodes have played a little something we call What the Sleuth is Going On? 3 rapid fire questions. First thing that comes to mind, are you ready to play?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, my friend. Question number 1. What's the worst bad breath you've ever encountered?
Worst bad breath. Yeah, I mean, it was definitely honestly, it was probably mine. Like, I've probably my own bad breath. Yeah, I'm gonna go with mine. There's been some mornings where it hasn't been the greatest, but yeah, I'll take ownership on that.
Fair. I like it. Yeah, you're not the first to say that. That's for sure. All right.
I
Well,
haven't heard any of these questions, by the way, so, I'm shooting from the hip.
oh, so our regular listeners of this program, you know what that means? It means that he doesn't listen to the show. Hopefully, we have a new listener and subscriber to the show. He's too busy making the videos on his own social. Hey, okay, you can go or you can flee with Dr.
Let's lead with honesty.
Hey, authenticity. That's what it's all about on the Two Sleuth. All right, question number 2. If you could change one thing about your smile, what would it be?
Interesting. I never thought about this until maybe the last 2 weeks, but if I had to change anything, I would probably look into some, like, premolar, like, additive veneers to, like, fill out my smile, in my buccal corridors.
All right, that's very technical. All right, I like it. And for those of you who like are just listening to the audio portion, hop over to the YouTube channel and check it out. He's got a great smile. So like it's one of those where like somebody has like an amazing smile and you're like, really? That's true. Yeah, really? Good.
Like, if you asked me this 2 weeks ago, I would've said probably nothing, but
Mhm.
now the more I've been actually looking, I'm like, "You know what? If I had to do something, if someone pulled my leg, I would do that," but honestly, yeah, I'll go with nothing.
Yeah, well, for those that listened to the 100th episode, we actually talked about like what the categories were and what people talked about, and actually the majority answer really close was nothing. I love my smile just the way that it is. So yeah, that was a really popular answer for that one. All right, question number 3. If you could go back and be the inventor of any dental product, and no, you can't choose your own, which one would you choose and why?
If I could be the inventor of it. Um, I would say
His entrepreneurial brain is just like steaming
yeah,
and see it coming out his ears right now.
um,
He's monetizing everything.
I would probably go with, like, I don't know, cotton rolls. Cotton rolls sound good. Everyone needs them.
He's going with the disposable. All right, yeah, it's your answer. I'm not.
What should I have gone with?
No, I don't even. What should you have gone with? Don't shit all over yourself. It smells bad. I'm not.
Yeah, honestly, I would love to be in the payment space. So if I could control payments in most of the offices, that's what I would go with. But you said dental, so I was like, let me just make it, you know, dental friendly.
Dental
Yeah.
friendly. All right, cotton swab. All right, fair. All right. Well, my friend, has there been a popular answer? There was no judgment in my comment there whatsoever.
What have people said? Now I want to know. Now I want to know.
Well, no, now you got to go back and listen to the 100th episode, right? I told you we are going to get you to be a listener of this show. I mean, I've got to drive up ratings. That's what it's all about. You've got like 40 some odd thousand followers on Instagram. I've got to at least start whiffing like a tenth of that. So come on, man. It's about numbers. Well, I want to respect your time and my listening audience, and we try to keep it to a reasonable amount. Some people are like running scuba diving, their oxygen tanks are probably running out. So, in the last few minutes, my friend, is there anything that I haven't asked you that you'd like to share with my listening audience today?
I don't think so. Yeah, I would just say, for anyone that's listening and if any of these topics resonated, like, I'm happy to chat more. I'm on LinkedIn now. I could say that. Instagram is a super easy way to contact me, but yeah, I love talking about this stuff. I know the first time that we connected, I think we were on the phone for like an hour. So yeah, I appreciate you having me on, and yeah, this has been a lot of fun.
Yeah, the founder of the Clear Aligner Advisor, Dr. Avi Patel. Did I get that right? Avi, I was so close. I was so close. You got to give me a partial credit on that one. I tried. I really was like conscious of it.
Here,
And
so I'll say it right, Essenmacher.
thanks. See, you just had to throw one more in my face. I just love when there's like a competition on the Two Sleuth podcast, and
Just 3 letters.
like,
Greg, it's just 3 letters. You got this.
it's simple. It's not easy. Just like implementation and execution for all of our clients, it's simple, but it's not easy. Thank you so much, my friend, for being a guest on the Two Sleuth podcast today.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
All right, man. Take care. If you need help with converting lead calls into consultations, closing consults into more full arch cases, or creating a more strategic marketing message and branding for your practice or group, follow me for more tips or reach out to G&A Consult for a discovery call today.